All right, so I want to start this video off by saying just because I was disappointed by some of these doesn't mean that I hated them. All right, so that's not what this list is. This isn't a list of movies I hated. Now, there are films on here I straight up did not like, and I will tell you what is what throughout. But just so that we're clear, just so I'm, making this abundantly clear, because these films were disappointing, it does not mean that I hated them. It just means that my expectations may have been too high and I walked away from them disappointed. All right. I'm going to start with the most obvious, the biggest disappointment of the year. And it's a film that still got 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It did not make my top 10, which is what made it a disappointing entry for sure, because I thought that this was a guaranteed home run. I thought for sure there's no way this movie isn't making my top 10 list. It seemed like a shoe-in. It seemed like a sure thing. And this was Ty West's and Mia Goth's Maxine. This was definitely the biggest disappointment of the year, even though I still quite enjoyed the film. I still gave it a 4 out of 5. I thought that this was going to be a 5 easy. After how much I loved X, how much I loved Pearl, how much of a setup there was to this, the fact that they were making it this giallo throwback, that there was going to be this slasher, 80s thing with Mia Goth working on the script and touting it around, saying it's the best script, and the trailer was killer, and I was just so excited for this one. And you can watch our breakdown. We did a spoiler discussion, we did a spoiler free discussion, we discussed everything that we had an issue with in this movie. So I think I really got into all of my problems with the movie. But yeah, this one I walked away from bummed. Now, I have only seen it once, and maybe if I watch it, like if I watch Pearl, then X, then Maxine, maybe I will get a better appreciation for it and it will grow on me over time. That is totally possible. But as of right now, having only seen it the one time, it was a disappointment for 2024 for sure. Still enjoyed it, but I thought for sure that this was going to be an absolute love fest for me. And I just didn't love it. So Maxine had to be number one on this list. I'm not putting these in any order, but I had to talk about that one first because it was my biggest disappointment, even though I enjoyed it. All right, one I enjoyed less. I still had some moments with it that I liked, but overall, this was a major disappointment and felt like studio meddling from moment one. I knew from the fact that this was delayed so many times and then dropped on HBO Max, kind of, you know, out of nowhere. They were just kind of like, yeah, screw it. We're not putting it in theaters. We have no confidence in this. This, of course, is the Salem's Lot adaptation from Gary Dauberman. When this was announced after Dauberman had directed Annabelle Comes Home, which I really loved, he had worked on the scripts for It Chapter 1 and 2, which I really love. He had worked on other Stephen King projects as well. I thought this was a match made in heaven. I thought for sure this was going to land so well because I thought the tone of Annabelle Comes Home was really going to meet the tone of what I was expecting from Salem's Lot adaptation, being my favorite Stephen King novel. And when this thing kind of fell into, being shelved by HBO and Warner Brothers, I was devastated because I was like, oh no, like what happened? Either the movie is not testing well, which doesn't mean a whole lot to me, honestly. I've seen films test poorly and I love them. So I was just kind of like, release the damn thing, let me see it. But while watching it, I am positive that this film is the result of studios not allowing a director to do what they wanted to do. I can just tell watching the movie that this is studio meddling. I don't know if we're ever going to get a honest word out of the filmmakers or whatever when it comes to this. I don't know what they're allowed to say and what they're not. Maybe he doesn't want to have bad blood with the company. Maybe we'll get a documentary in the future or some behind the scenes type things that will reveal what really happened with this film. But man, I thought this was a poor adaptation of such a great novel, and it pales in comparison to Tobey Hooper's 1979 classic, Salem's Lot, which is just far superior in almost every way, which is a shame. But that's still a very good movie. So I'm not bummed that that's the great version that we have of this. I just thought that this one could be even better. I know we have the Rob Lowe 2000 and I think 2004 miniseries, which was okay as well. But man, I was really looking forward to this movie, and what a disappointment. But at least with this one, I feel like the blow was lessened a bit because it was held back for so long that we all kind of suspected that this was going to have issues, right? If this would have just came out, if they would have released this in theaters without any kind of heads up on like, hey, this isn't testing well, and we're holding it back because we don't really have a lot of confidence in it, I think that lessened the blow. If they would have released it when they were originally going to release it in I think 2022, and it was what it is, I think I would have been even more disappointed because I was so excited for this movie, and unfortunately, yeah, it didn't turn out so good. Okay. The next two, one of them I liked less than the other one. I'm still not huge on either, but one I'm okay with, one I enjoyed. Kaylee liked it more than I did, but the other one I didn't like. And I'm mentioning both of these together because these are both Nepo films. One being Humane, which was Caitlin Cronenberg's directorial debut. I was really looking forward to this one because I really love what Brandon Cronenberg has been doing as a filmmaker, and I was very excited to see what another Cronenberg could bring to the table. Obviously, David has made plenty of great films that I love. Brandon has now made a bunch of films that I've greatly enjoyed, and I was like, hey, another Cronenberg? Why the hell not? Maybe she'll bring something to the table. And this was one that I really just did not enjoy. It was trying to have some social commentary to it, and I felt that it kind of got lost in itself, and I felt like it didn't drive the point home that it was trying to drive home in a clever way that uh really did a good job kind of breaking down the issue. I think it was a little heavy handed, and I don't think that it came off very well conceived, and it felt like an amateur filmmaker who probably should have taken a little more time to flesh out their idea. So I don't know, I thought that this was a pretty disappointing movie. And then on the flip side of that, another Nepo film from this year was M. Night Shyamalan's daughter made a movie called The Watchers with Dakota Fanning. This one I liked more than Humane. Kaylee actually liked it even more than I did. But overall, I thought that the premise of the movie felt very interesting, and I don't feel like we, once again, kind of like with Humane, I don't think that this was really well thought out, and it is pretty predictable in a way that I felt hurt the film. Sometimes I can watch movies that are predictable, but I still greatly enjoy the ride, so I don't really care. But with this one, the predictability of things actually hurt the experience because I felt like that's mostly what it had to offer, right? So if the film is stronger in its characters, in its atmosphere, in its storytelling, I don't mind when the twists don't land as well as they're trying to, because the rest of the experience is strong. So I don't really care. But with this one, I felt that the premise was its strongest attribute, and its twists, it relied on them. And when you had figured them out and the characters weren't that strong, it made the film not as enjoyable as it could have been had maybe they thought this through better. So I don't think it's a bad film. I thought it was fine, but being attached to M. Night Shyamalan, who also made a film this year, which will end up on a different list of another video I'm making later today. I was definitely disappointed with this one because of the attachment of M. Night Shyamalan, who I think also executive produced this, so had a hand in it to some degree, other than making the person who made the movie. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed in this one. I wasn't like over the moon excited for this one, but I was interested to see what the director could do, and I was a bit disappointed. Next up, this isn't something that I was like super excited for, but I thought it had promise because I liked the first one okay. I like the second one even more, and this is a reboot or a remake, and this is The Strangers Chapter 1. This is a terrible film. And I thought after the success of Prey at Night, the second film, and the fact that they came and they had Rennie Harlan and they were like, we're making 3 films back to back. I was like, wow, they must have something here, right? Like if you're going to make 3 movies back to back to back, you must have some kind of a story that feels so big you can't contain it to one film, right? And no, they literally just remade the first film, but worse. It's almost identically the same film as the first. They just changed a couple things and made them worse. So while I'm somewhat interested in the second one, because now at least we're in new territory, right? Like the first film is covered. And while it feels like a cheap imitation of the first film, we are done with that storyline. So we do kind of get to see The Strangers Part 2 that we never saw, because Strangers Prey at Night is like, while it is technically a sequel, it's not dealing with the characters from the original film. So it feels kind of like a spin-off or its own thing. This one is dealing with the surviving character of the first one. And we kind of get to see what we never got to see with the first one. So we are getting into new territory, and they built up some things that weren't in the first original film that will be expanded upon, and the lore will be widened here in the second and third film. So I'm somewhat interested. I don't have a lot of hope. So hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised, like, oh wow, the second one's actually watchable, the second one's actually decent, which I wouldn't be shocked if that happens. But I will be somewhat surprised. I'm kind of like, there's a part of me that thinks like it can't be worse. So it might be one of these things where I'm like, because my expectations are so low, I might walk out of it being like, well, I thought it was gonna be such shit that it's like it's okay, which makes it better, right? When your expectations are in the gutter and it exceeds those, which isn't hard to do, it can actually make the film feel better than it actually is, because you're like, I thought it was going to be total shit, and it's like okay, which made it feel like it was even better than okay, which is, yeah, it's a weird thing that your mind does. So anyway, Strangers Chapter 1, terrible film that could have been good and does not warrant a 3 film thing. So because we have the horror channel, because it's a big thing, we will be covering them for sure. But this was one where they were going to send me a 4K copy of the movie, and I was like, you can keep it. You can give it to someone else. You honestly, I don't even want it. Because I just didn't want to take it from someone else who might enjoy it and want a copy. But as somebody who is kind of a completist and collects everything, and I do own The Strangers 1 and Prey at Night, I probably would have liked to have gotten this, and I don't want to pay for it. So I should have taken it. Stupid me. But in the moment, I was just like, absolutely not. We were still very angry at the movie. So when they were like emailed me about it not that long after we saw it, and we were like, hey, do you want a copy? I was like, absolutely not. All right, next up, we have a movie that was made by a filmmaker that I greatly respect, and I got to interview for this very film, and I hated the movie. And I love the guy, and I was so bummed and so disappointed because, you know, here's a guy, Marcus Dunstan, who co-wrote Saw 4 through 7. He's working on Saw 11. Whether or not that ever sees the light of day remains to be seen. We'll discuss that in a future video. But I was super excited because this is like a slasher movie, whodunit kind of thing, made by Marcus Dunstan. And it's called All My Friends Are Dead, and I got sent the copy to do the interview with him, and I was like super excited. I was like, I get to talk to Marcus Dunstan. This is so cool. He's like a hero of mine for horror writing. I think he's a really solid horror writer. He made the Feast movies and The Collectors and Piranhas, and he's made a lot of The Neighbor and a lot of cool films. And I was like, oh man, I really, I'm excited about this. Now, he made a movie called like Unhuman, which is similar to this, and I hated that. So when I saw its tone and it kind of reminded me of that, I was a little nervous, but I was like, nah, hopefully he pulls it together for this one. And they sent me the copy. I watched it and I hated it. And then I had to interview him. And if you watch the interview, I'm still having a great time with him, but I almost don't discuss the film at all in any way that shows my thoughts towards it, because I was trying to hide what I thought of the film. And I wasn't going to tell him like, oh, great movie. I would never do that. I would just cancel the interview if I had to do that. If they were like, oh, you have to talk about the movie, you have to praise it, I would step down. I would just be like, no fucking way. I will not do this. I had an interview with the director of Subservience where they kind of wanted that. They were like, if you watch the movie and do the interview, you're not allowed to review the movie. And I was like, what do you mean? Like ever? And they just kept telling me like, no, you can't review the film. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm a movie review channel. Like, I don't, what do you mean I can't review it? And I asked 5 different ways and I kept getting the same response. No, like, you cannot review the film. And I'm like, ever? Even if I go and watch it on my own, like a different copy of it, I can't ever discuss the film. And they were like, that's correct. And I was like, then cancel the interview. What the fuck are you talking about? It was the weirdest thing ever. And then I brought it to the American side because there's like 2 different distributors and distributors. That's why I couldn't say it right. And I went to the American one and they were like, that's the weirdest fucking thing I've ever heard. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like, we would never do that to you. And I was like, yeah, it's super weird, right? And I even sent them the email like, am I crazy? And they're like, this is fucking weird. And I was like, right? What do you mean I can't review the movie? Anyway, so it's kind of a situation like that. I did not like the interview process with Marcus. That was actually really lame. There was like someone on the call that was like sitting there in the chat and like being like, you have 5 minutes and don't, you can't talk about these things or whatever. And I was like, this is so lame. But I had a great time with him and I hated the movie. So huge disappointment all around. But meeting Marcus was very cool. Talking with him was great. I only got to talk with him like 5 or 10 minutes, but still really lame movie. Such a shame to talk to someone you really respect while hating something that they have done and trying to, skirt around it. Like, yeah. Anyway. All right. Lastly, this was one that I was looking forward to mostly because of who stars in it, which is Sarah Paulson, as well as who made it, which was Hulu, which I thought Hulu, you know, having put out a lot of really cool movies lately, I feel like they throw up a lot of gems every year that like No One Will Save You, which was like I think my number 2 from last like 2 years ago now. Loved that film. Mr. Crockett, another movie that I put in my overlooked films. Prey, which is a Predator film that I loved. Fresh with Sebastian Stan. Hulu loves to throw on these fantastic, awesome, like under the radar horror films. And when they were putting out this movie called Hold Your Breath with Sarah Paulson, it was a period piece. It looked like it had a lot of atmosphere to it. Kind of reminded me of that movie with Thomas Jane, 1922, which was on Netflix. It was a Stephen King adaptation. I was like, oh, this could be really good. You know, Hulu throws up some very cool films, but man, this was such a boring movie. I felt like nothing ever happened in this, and I'm not one of those types of people who watches something like The Babadook or Saint Maud and is like, nothing happened. No, tons happen in that film. They're just slower paced. Those are fucking masterpieces, in my opinion. And so I'm not somebody who's like, you know, down on slower paced films. I just felt like this movie never went anywhere. I thought that it was completely lost in itself. I was holding my breath until I died, because if you hold your breath waiting for something to happen, you are going to die waiting for something to happen. So very lame movie. Big disappointment because it was a Hulu movie with Sarah Paulson, and one that really, really did not land with me at all. So anyway, that's some films. Wasn't a 10. This was 7 films. Yeah, I honestly, this was a great year. You know, I couldn't even come up with 10 disappointments, right? Like, there was other films. I mean, there's definitely probably 40 or 50 other films that I watched that I really did not enjoy or didn't like or was like very ho-hum on. But I didn't have any expectations for those movies. They were all just kind of random ones I threw on and was like, you know, that was fine. Or like, nah, that sucked, you know, but I didn't really care like either way. I just threw them on expecting whatever and got a lame movie. So that I can't really count that as a disappointment. It's a disappointment in the fact that I wasted my time watching them, that I sat down in hopes that it was going to be an entertaining time. So in that regard, yes, it's a disappointment, but it's not something that I was like, yes, this could be great. Like, I have such expectations for these. So these were the movies that really stuck out for me that I was stoked about. And 7 movies. Out of all the ones I was super excited for, I feel like all the other ones lived up to at least what I was hoping from them. Um, you know, I could throw on something like Apartment 7A, I guess, if I really want to, because that has Julia Garner in it. And I'm not a huge fan of Rosemary's Baby, though. I think that's why when the movie was fine, I liked it. It was fine. I think it could have been much better with how great The First Omen was, being another prequel to a very popular horror film in The Omen. This being a prequel to Rosemary's Baby and kind of being set around a similar time period and focusing on a woman getting pregnant and whatever. They are similar. I guess you could throw in Apartment 7A alongside of Immaculate and First Omen as similar types of vibes of film, but that being the least successful of the three by like a large margin. I think First Omen and Immaculate are really damn good movies, and Apartment 7A was just okay. I liked it, but you know, as I said, my expectations weren't too high. The only thing that made them high is that I love Julia Garner. I think she's fantastic. I think she's done some wonderful things. I think she's a great actress, and I'm really looking forward to The Wolfman, which we are seeing very soon in the next couple days. So hopefully that's awesome, and we can talk about that then. But there's a random 8th title that I guess kind of was a bit of a disappointment. But anyway, what were your guys' biggest disappointments of the year? What did not live up to the hype for you? Did the hype kill a movie for you? That can happen where, you know, the hype gets too high. Maxine is probably that movie from this year where my excitement level was next level. It was absurd how high my expectations were for the film. So maybe no film could have ever lived up to it. You know, but I don't know. Long Legs, I had pretty much the same level of hype for, and that made, I think, my number 4 of the year. And Maxine would probably not even make my top 20. So, you know, expectations, while they can harm a film, if your film is super strong, you can only, you know, it can only hurt it so much. So anyway, that's that. Biggest disappointments. Not a ton on here, but still bit of a bummer. You know, every year is going to have them. Every year is going to have them. So, you know, anyway. All right. I'll see you in the comments. Adios.